This is Miss Fay continuing with the reading of Night, picking up on page 72 with special guest readers Jack Thornton, Jake Laprise, and Will Sabin. Thank you all for being with us here today. So, page 72, Jack?
Yes, we were ready. So were the doctors. Dr. Mengel was holding a list, our numbers. He nodded at the block test. We can begin, as if it were a game. The first to go were the notables of the block, the Stubnell test, the capos, the foreman, all of whom were in perfect physical condition, of course. Then came the ordinary prisoners' terms. Dr. Mengel looked over them, from head to toe. From time to time he noted a number, but had one thought, not to have my number taken down, and not to show my left arm. In front of me, there were only Tibby and Yossi. They passed. I had time to notice that Mengel had not written down their numbers. Someone pushed me. It was my turn. I ran without looking back. My head was spinning. You are too skinny. You are too weak. You are too skinny. You are good for the ovens. The race seemed endless. I felt as though I had been running for years. You are too skinny. You are too weak. At last I arrived, exhausted. When I had caught my breath, I asked Yossi and Tibby, "Did they write me down?" "No," said Yossi, smiling. He added, "Anyway, they couldn't have. You were running too fast." I began to laugh. I was happy. I felt like kissing him. At that moment, the others did not matter. They had not written me down. Those whose numbers had been noted were standing apart, abandoned by the whole world. Some were silently weeping.
The SS officers left. The blockade test appeared, his face reflecting our collective weariness. It all went well. Don't worry, nothing will happen to anyone. Not to anyone. He was still trying to smile. A poor, emaciated Jew questioned him anxiously, his voice trembling. "But, sir, they did write me down." At that, the blockade test vented his anger. "What? Someone refused to take his word? What is it now? Perhaps you think I'm lying? I'm telling you, once and for all, nothing will happen to you. Nothing. You just like to wallow in your despair, you fools." The bell rang, signaling that the selection had ended in the entire camp. With all my strength, I began to race toward Block 36. Midway, I met my father. He came toward me. "So, did you pass?" "Yes. And you?" "Also." We were able to breathe again. My father had a present for me, a half ration of bread, bartered for something he had found at the depot, a piece of rubber that could be used to repair a shoe. The bell. It was already time to part, to go to bed. The bell regulated everything. It gave me orders, and I executed them blindly. I hated that bell. Whenever I happened to dream of a better world, I imagined a universe without a bell.
A few days passed. We were no longer thinking about the selection. We went to work as usual and loaded the heavy stones onto the freight cars. The rations had grown smaller. That was the only change. We had risen at dawn, as we did every day. We had received our black coffee, our ration of bread. We were about to head out to the workyard as always, but the blocklet task came running. "Let's have a moment of quiet. I have here a list of numbers. I shall read them to you. All of those called will not go to work with this morning. They will stay in the camp." Softly he read some 10 numbers. We understood. These were the numbers from the selection Dr. Mengele has not forgotten. The blocklet test turned to go to his room. The 10 prisoners surrounded him, clinging to his clothes. "Save us," he promised. "We want to go to the depot. We are strong enough to work. We are good workers. We want." He tried to calm them, to reassure them about their fate, to explain to them that staying at the camp did not mean much, had no tragic significance. After all, I stay here every day. The argument was more flimsy. He realized it, and without another word, locked himself in his room. The bell had just rung. Form ranks. Now it was no longer mattered that the work was hard. All that mattered was to be far from the block, far from the crucible of death, from the center of hell. I saw my father running in my direction. Suddenly I was afraid. "What's happening?" He was out of breath, hardly able to open his mouth. Me too. They told me to stay out in the camp. They had recorded his number without noticing. "What are we going to do?" I said anxiously, but it was he who tried to reassure me. "It's not certain yet. There's still a chance. Today they will do another selection, a decisive one." I said nothing.
He felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted to tell me so many things. His speech became confused. His voice was choked. He knew that I had to leave in a few moments. He was going to remain alone. So alone. "Here, take this knife," he said. "I won't need it anymore. You may find it useful. Also take this spoon. Don't sell it. Quickly. Go ahead. Take what I'm giving you. My inheritance." "Don't talk like that, Father." I was on the verge of breaking into sobs. I didn't want you to say such things. Keep a spoon and knife. You will need them as much as I. We'll see each other tonight after work. He looked at me with his tired eyes, veiled by despair. He insisted, I'm asking you, take it. Do as I ask you, my son. Time is running out. Do as your father asks you. Our capo shouted the order to march. The commando headed toward the camp gate. Left, right. I was biting my lips. My father had remained near the block, leaning against the wall. Then he began to run, to try to catch up with us. Perhaps he had forgotten to tell me something, but we were marching too fast. Left, right. We were at the gate. We were being counted. Around us, the din of military music. Then we were outside.
All day I plodded around like a sleepwalker. Tibby and Yossi would call out to me from time to time, trying to reassure me, as did the capo who had given me easier tasks that day. I felt sick at the heart. How kindly they treated me. Like an orphan, I thought. Even now, my father is helping me. I myself didn't know whether I wanted the day to go by quickly or not. I was afraid of finding myself alone that evening. How good it would be to die right here. At last, we began the return journey. How I longed for an order to run. The military march, the gate, the camp. I ran toward Block 36. Were there still miracles on this earth? He was alive. He had passed the second selection. He had still proved his usefulness. I gave him back his knife and spoon.
A Cuba drummer has left us. A victim of the selection, lately he has been wandering among us. His eyes glazed, telling everyone how weak he was. I can't go on. It's over. We tried to raise his spirits, but he wouldn't listen to anything we said. He just kept repeating that it was all over for him, that he would no longer fight. He had no more strength, no more faith. His eyes would suddenly go blank, leaving 2 gaping wounds, 2 wells of terror. He was not alone in having lost his faith during those days of selection. I knew a rabbi from a small town in Poland. He was old and bent, his lips constantly trembling. He was always praying in the block at work and in the ranks. He recited entire pages from the Talmud, arguing with himself and answering himself endless questions. One day he said to me, "It's over. God is no longer with us." And as though he regretted having uttered such a word, so coldly, so dryly, he added in his broken voice, "I know. No one has the right to say things like that. I know very well. Man is too insignificant, too limited to even try to comprehend God's mysterious ways. But what can someone like myself do? I'm neither a sage nor just a man. I'm not a saint. I'm a simple creature of flesh and bone. I suffer from a hell in my soul and in my flesh. I also have eyes. I can see what is being done here. Where is God's mercy? Where is God? How can I believe? How can anyone believe in this God of mercy?"
Poor Akiba the drummer. If only he could have kept his faith in God. If only he could have considered the suffering a divine test. He would not have been swept away by the selection. But as soon as he felt the first chinks in his face, he lost all incentive to fight and opened the door to death. When the selection came, he was doomed from the start, offering his neck to the executioner, as it were. All he said of us was, "In 3 days I'll be gone. Say Kaddish for me." We promised in 3 days, when we would see the smoke rising from the chimney, we would think of him. We would gather 10 men and hold a special service. All his friends would say Kaddish. Then he left in the direction of the hospital. His step was almost steady, and he never looked back. An ambulance was waiting there to take him to Birkenau. There were followed terrible days. We received more blows than food. The work was crushing, and 3 days after he left, we forgot to say Kaddish.